Good morning. Today we are going to discuss about intelligence and creativity, part three, from the educational psychology. The video content has been made available for informational and educational purpose only. Intelligence and creativity. We will start with verbal and performance tests. The early tests of intelligence were verbal or linguistic in nature. So, to take such tests, knowledge of language of the test is necessary. The verbal test of intelligence have certain disadvantages. Some may give a wrong response not because they lack sufficient intelligence, but because of the misunderstanding of the language items in such test. Similarly, those whose mental abilities are not higher but who have a language proficiency may score high in the verbal test. So in the verbal test, it's not depends upon the mental ability. Somebody is having a good language proficiency can score more. Also, the linguistics test of intelligence or cannot be applied to the test the abilities of those who do not know the language. The same way, it has another issue like very young children, tribal or aboriginals, those with sensory handicaps cannot pass the linguistics test. Also, the first issue is somebody who's having a language proficiency can score higher marks, and even though they are and it's not only depends upon the mental ability. Also, the linguistic test of intelligence cannot be applied to the test to the abilities of those who do not know the language, and very young children, tribal or aboriginals, and those with sensory hardships. So in order to get over these limitations, performance test of intelligence were devised. So that's why the what is the purpose of having a performance test? We have to explain all this. The performance test or non-verbal, but all non-verbal tests need to be performance test. Need not be performance test or non-verbal, but it will not work vice versa. But all the non-verbal tests need not be a performance test. A non-verbal test such as matrices, maze, etc., do not use the words but use the symbols and diagrams and other perpetual designs, whereas the performance test of intelligence make use of a concrete object with which the subject has to do something. So the performance test of intelligence assess the behavior arising out of intelligence and involve doing certain standardized tasks using the ordinary materials like cubes, beads, etc., with which one is familiar. The test devised by Pinter and Patterson, Collins and Dever, and Bhatia for the Indian children are some popular performance test of intelligence. So the Bhatia's test of intelligence includes Coe's block design test, Alexander Pons along test, pattern drawing test, immediate memory test for the digit, the picture construction test. So just we'll go back. The tests are divided by Pinter and Patterson, Collins and Dever, and Bhatia. The Bhatia is for the Indian children's, are some popular performance test of intelligence. The Bhatia test of intelligence includes Koch's block design test, Alexander Pons along test, and the pattern drawing test, and the immediate memory test for digits, and the picture construction test. In estimating the mental level of performance, the time taken to complete the assigned task as well as the errors committed in the course of performance are taken into account, and the MA arrived at from the table of norms provided with the test battery. Let's go back. The early tests of intelligence were verbal or linguistic nature. So to take such test, knowledge of language of the test is very essential. The verbal tests of intelligence have some other disadvantages. Some may give a wrong response not because they lack sufficient intelligence, but because of the misunderstanding of the language items in such test. Similarly, the mental abilities are not higher, but who have the language proficiency may score higher. Linguistic test of intelligence cannot be applied to the test of abilities for those who do not know the language, like the young children's, tribal or aboriginals. To get over these limitations of the test of intelligence, otherwise the performance tests are non-verbal, but all the non-verbal tests need not to be a performance test. Non-verbal tests such as matrices, mazes do not use the word but use the symbols, diagrams, and other perceptual designs. Whereas the performance test of intelligence make use of the concrete object whether the subject has to do something. So the performance test of intelligence assesses the behavior as arising out of the intelligence and involve doing certain standardized tasks using the ordinary materials like cubes, beads, etc., with which one is familiar. The test devised by Pinter and Patterson, Collins and Dever and Bhatia for the Indian children are some popular performance tests of intelligence. So the Bhatia test of intelligence includes a course, block design test, Alexander. The Bhatia's test of intelligence includes Koch's blocks design test, Alexander paused along test, pattern drawing test, and immediate test for digits, the picture construction test. Finally, in estimating the mental level of the performance, we have to consider the time taken to complete the assigned task as well as the errors committed in the course of the performance are taken into account. And the MEA has arrived at the form the table of norms provided the test battery. So when to use the performance test? As the result obtained from the verbal performance test correlate only to the moderate extent. The performance test cannot be used as a good substitute for the verbal test of intelligence. However, they can be used for those who have sufficient linguistic ability along with the verbal intelligence test so as to get a complete understanding about their intelligence. Generally, the performance test of intelligence are preferred in those situations where verbal test could not be employed effectively. For those who have either no or poor linguistic ability, very young children, tribal or aboriginals, and those with sensory handicaps. At the same time, what are the limitations of the performance test? Administering and interpreting the performance test of linguistic Administering and interpreting the performance test of intelligence requires specially trained personnel. There appears to be a very little positive correlation between one score in verbal and in the performance test of intelligence. And so the performance tests are not as reliable as a verbal test, nor should they be used as a substitute for the verbal test. They should be used only for when verbal or perceptual non-linguistic test cannot be used. And the third limitation is they cannot predict socialistic achievement. Performance test materials are costly. Many factors other than the intelligence seems to be help success in the performance test. So the performance test cannot be used as a group test. And finally, many material used in the performance test of intelligence appears similar to the sophisticated toys with which the children from the higher socioeconomic groups may be familiar, and such children use the familiarity with the materials may score high, though they may not really have such high mental ability. That's the last limitations. So let's go back to when to use a performance test and limitation of performance test. When to use a performance test. So the performance test cannot be used as a good substitute for the verbal test of intelligence. However, they can be used for those who have sufficient linguistic ability along with verbal intelligences so as to get a complete understanding about their intelligence. So wherever verbal test could not be employed effectively, the performance test can be applied. For those who have either no or poor linguistic ability, very young children, tribal or aboriginals, and those with the sensory handicaps, we can use only the intelligence performance test for the intelligence, not the verbal test. At the same time, the limitations of performance test, like first one is the administering and interpreting the performance test of intelligence, because very specialized trained personnel. And the second limitation is this is not as reliable as verbal test. It's a bit of a little positive correlation between the one score in verbal and in the performance test. So this is not as reliable as a verbal test, nor it can they should be used as a substitute for the verbal test. They should be used only when the verbal or perceptual non-linguistic cannot be used. The third one is like they cannot predict a scholastic achievement. Performance test is always costly, and many factors other than the intelligence seems to help success in the performance test. Performance test cannot be used for the as a group test. Many materials used in the performance test of the intelligence appear similar to the sophisticated toys, for which the children from the higher socioeconomic groups may be familiar, and such children, due to familiarity with materials, may score high, though they may not really have such high mental ability. What is the uses of intelligent test? So, the intelligent test helps in providing educational and vocational guidance. They give the most valuable objective information regarding the level and the quality of mental abilities of the children. They help in classifying the students into homogeneous groups of ability or performance. At the same time, they help in diagnosing the cause of other backwardness. They help in predicting the future progress. They are useful in selecting the individuals for the different job. They are used in research on psychology and education. They are used in clinic and mental hospitals in order to record the effectiveness of the treatment. So, what are the 8 uses of intelligent test? Its help in providing educational and vocational guidance, most valuable objective information regarding the level and the quality of the mental ability of the children. It helps in classifying the students into homogeneous group, and it's used for diagnosing the cause for the backwardness. It's predict the future progress, and used to select the individuals for the different jobs. They use in research in psychology and education, and finally, they use in clinics and mental hospitals in order to record the effectiveness of the treatment. What are the limitations of the intelligent test? It is really difficult to say that intelligent tests have a 100% validity. They measure only a native mental capacity. The social cultural differences, lack of interest, or the coaching, and the test unreliability, and many other factors make us careful in not fully accepting the computer IQ as a true indication of people's mental worth. The intelligent tests are also culture specific, are not completely culture fair. Intelligent tests cannot use the scales which have non-zero point and equal intervals. Therefore, a person who do not answer any items correctly in an intelligent test is not necessarily totally lacking in intelligence. Similarly, a derived score of 140 does not represent twice the intelligence of the derived score of 70. It simply represents more intelligence. Measured IQs are affected by a testing climate, familiarity of the individual with the test items, and the emotional interference. Let's revise the use of intelligent test and limitations of intelligent test. Use of intelligent test, educational vocational guidance, and level and quality of mental ability of the children's. It helps in for all this below, like homogeneous group of ability, diagnosing the cause of the backwardness, predicting the future progress, selecting the individuals for the different jobs, research in psychology and education, clinics and mental hospitals to record the effectiveness of the treatment. When it comes to limitations, it's really difficult to say the intelligent tests have 100 percentage because they measure only the native mental capacity. There are many other factors make us careful is not fully accepting the computed IQ as a true indication of people's mental worth, like social cultural differences, lack of interest or coaching or test unreliability. Its intelligent tests are also the culture specific and not completely culture fair. The intelligent test cannot use the scales which have a known zero point and equal intervals. So a person who do not answer any items correctly in the intelligent test is not necessarily totally lacking intelligence. Similarly, a person who scored 70 is and another person scored 140 does not represent twice the intelligence of the derived scores. So the measured IQs are affected by testing climate, familiarity of the individuals with the test items, and the emotional interference, etc. Culture fact tests. It should be remembered that most of the intelligent tests are culture specific, and the items often favor the socioeconomic groups which the test conductor is linked. This bias may not be conscious, but is there. Matters taken for granted in one culture cannot be taken for the granted in another culture. So this applies equally to the deprived subculture within more advanced culture in the same society. Further, the mental tests emphasize the speed, and in non-competitive cultures, a speed is not valued as much as slowness. So it is for this reason that what are known as culture free and culture fair tests of intelligence are attempted to be constructed now. Certain tests devised by cattle, so which consist of items of classifications, completion of series, matrices, and spatial perceptions and progress matrices of Raman. So there are certain tests devised by Cattell, which consist of items of classifications, completion of series, matrices, and spatial perception and the progressive matrices of Rowan. For example, it consists of figures and designs. The subject apprehends the relationship with the figures and the select appropriate part for completion of each pattern of systems of relations. It's appear to be the culture free and applicable to children of different culture as well as socio-economic levels. So let's revise the culture test. We have to remember that most of the intelligent tests are culture specific. The item often favor the socioeconomic groups which the test conductor is linked. So the bias may not be conscious, but it is there. The matter taken for granted in one culture cannot be taken for the granted in another culture. So this applies equally to deprive the subcultures within more advanced culture in the same society. Further, the mental test emphasizes speed is not competitive cultures. The speed is not valued as much as slowness. It is for this reason that what are the known as culture free or culture fair tests of intelligence are attempted to be constructed now. So there are certain tests devised by Cattell which consist of items of classification, completion of series, matrices, and spatial perceptions and the progressive matrices of Ravan. So it consists of figures and designs, subject appliance, relation between figures, and select appropriate part for the completion of each partner system of relations. So it appears to be the culture free and applicable to children of a different culture as well as socio-economic levels. So the meaning of creativity, the creativity is the capacity of the individual to discover or produce new ideas. It may also include restructuring or rearranging the old idea. The only precaution for renaming an expression as creative is that it should not be mere repetition or reproduction of what has already been experienced or learned. Ashubal defines creativity as a rare capacity of developing insights, sensitiveness, and appreciations in a circumscribed content area of intellectual or artistic activities. Torrance speak of creativity as a mental process of seeing or creating most unforeseen and a novel relationship between two or more things or ideas. In fact, according to Torrance, two stages are involved in this process: to shake and throw the things together, and to discriminate from the variety of different possibilities, and to synthesize and bring together the elements in a new and original ways. Burner stated that all form of creativity grow out of the combinational activity, a placing of thing in a new perspective. Dravdell defines the creativity as the capacity of the person to produce compositions, product, or ideas which are essentially new or novel and previously unknown to the producer. In the words of C.R. Rogers, creative process is the emergence in action of a novel relation or the product, growing out of the uniqueness of the individual on one hand and the material, event, people, or circumstances of his life on the other hand. Let's go back to the meaning of creativity. Creativity, we all know that it's the capacity of the individual to discover or to produce new ideas. So it may not include restructuring or rearranging the whole idea. The only precaution for renaming an expression as creative is that it should not be a mere repetition or reproduction of what has already been experienced or learned. Then it will not be considered as a creativity. Ashubal is very clear a rare capacity for the developing insights, sensitiveness, and appreciations in a circumscribed content area of intellectual or artistic activities. Torrance speak of creativity as a mental process of seeing or creating most unfolds in a novel relationship between the two or more things or ideas. He has two stages involved in this process. One is the shake, throw things together, and to discriminate from the variety of different possibilities. To shake, throw things together, and to discriminate from the variety of different possibilities. And second stage is to synthesize and bring together elements in an original way. Whereas Brunner state that all forms of creativity grow out of a combinational activity, a placing of thing in a new perspective. Drevadl, Drevdal, defines the creativity as the capacity of person to produce composition, produce products or ideas which are essential, new, or novel and previously unknown to producers. So in the words of C.R. Rogers, the creative process is the emergence in action of a novel relation or the product. It's the emergence in action of a novel relation or product. Growing out of the uniqueness of the individual on one hand, and material event, people, and the circumstances of his life on the other hand. So, on one hand, the creative process is the emergence in action of the novel relation or product. The growing out of the uniqueness of the individual on one hand. So growing out of the uniqueness of the individual is on one hand, and this, at the same time, on the other hand, material, even people, or circumstances of his life on the other hand. The nature or characteristic of creativity. The end product of creative thinking should be something tangible, such as a poem, a piece of music, a scientific theory, or a new mechanical or electronic contrivance. Everyone possesses creative prowess to some degree. Although the creative abilities are natural endowment, yet they are capable of being nourished or nurtured by training or education. The fourth one is any creative expressions is a source of joy and satisfaction to the creator. There is a perfect individuality in one's creative expression. So the creator is a person who is able to make ego involved statements like it is my idea, I have solved the problem. In creative expression there is a complete ego involvement. Creativity involves divergent thinking, having a freedom of for the multiplicity of the responses, choices, and lines of actions. By traveling on the routine, the beaten track, one cannot create but only reproduce or repeat. So, by traveling on the routine, beaten track, one cannot create but only reproduce or repeat. The field of creative expression is very wide. It covers all the aspects of human accomplishment, like scientific inventions, discoveries, composing of poems, writing of stories, dramas, good performance in the field of dance, music, painting, sculpture, politics, political and social leadership, business, teaching, and other professions. So I'll repeat, it covers the field of creative expression is very wide. It covers all the aspects of human accomplishments like scientific inventions and discoveries, composing of poem, writing of stories, dramas, good performance in the field of dance, music, painting, sculpture, political and social leadership, business, teaching, and other professions. So the important components of creativity as identified by J.P. Gulford and Torrance are the ideational fluency, originality, flexibility, divergent thinking, persistence, self confidence, sensitiveness, and the ability to see relationship and make associations. Let's revise the nature and character of creativity. The end product of creative thinking should be something tangible, such as a poem, a piece of music, a scientific theory, or a new mechanical. So the end product is tangible. Everyone has having a creative powers, but to some degree. So it's a natural endowment. Okay, it's capable of being nourished or nurtured by training or education. It's a source of joy and satisfaction to the creator. There is perfect individuality in one's creative expressions. Always, the creator is a person who is able to make involved statement. It's my idea. I have solved the problem, etc. In creative expression, if you see, it's a complete ego involvement. Creativity involves divergent thinking, freedom of multiplicity of responses, choices, lines of action. By traveling on the routine beaten track, one cannot create but only reproduce or repeat. The creative expression is a very wide. It covers all the aspects of the human accomplishment, inventions, discoveries, poems, stories, dramas, good performance for the dance, music, painting, sculpture, and followed by political and social leadership, business, teaching, and other portions. So the important components of creativity as identified by J.P. Gulford and Torrance are ideational fluency, originality, flexibility, divergent thinking, persistence, self-confidence, sensitiveness, and ability to see relationship and make associations. Let's move on to the stages in the process of creative thinking. Graham Wallace and Patrick. They are independently have indicated four stages of creativity. They are preparation, incubation, illumination, and verification, and revisions if needed. The preparation. In the preparation stage, the problem is defined and explained. It means orientation of the problems and involve purposeful study, discussion with others, and the acquisition of facts. The relevant facts and materials considered essentials are gathered. A plan of action is formulated. So first, they are in the preparation stage. Problem is defined and explained. Orientation means orientation of the problem and involve purposeful study and discussion with others and acquisition of facts. So the relevant facts and materials considered essentials are gathered. A plan for the action is formulated. First plan and then action. The creative work is largely work for diligence and industry. Perspiration rather than inspiration is a proper preparation. Perspiration rather than inspiration is a proper preparation. No painter, poet, or scientist or novelist have reached a greater eminence overnight. And almost every creative thinker reports that he worked laboriously during his early days. So, incubation. This stage is characterized by the overt behavior. During this stage, one can make rest or sleep or do even some other problem. Just as nothing is added to the egg, but only it is kept warm. So during the period of incubation, no new knowledge or experience is added to the existing stock. During this stage, there is no external disturbances. It's a common experience that we sometimes forget an important name. If recalling is postponed, later on it comes to our mind. Hurry and compulsions are fatal to creativity. In incubation, the mind is relaxed. If incubation is hastened, it will result in abortion. Elimination. Incubation lead to elimination. During this stage, there is a sudden appearance of solution to the problems. In the case of chimpanzees in Kohler experiment, there was a sudden dawn of insight, resulting in the connection of the sticks with the fruit. So illumination implies insight. Illumination may occur at any time, even during the dreams. Verification. Then comes the final stage that of verification. During this stage, we determine whether the solution is the correct one or not. Sometimes the solutions need some modification. This is the evaluation of the solution of the problem. Then, in the light of the result of the verification or testing, a revision is made till the solution is workable. These stages should not be considered as rigid and fixed. One may get the elimination without passing through the incubation. In certain cases, the cycle has repeated till they get an solutions. The creativity as a natural endowment need stimulation and nourishment. The stages in the process of creative thinking, Graham Wells and Patrick independently have indicated four stages of creativity. That is preparation, incubation, illumination, and verification. Preparation, first problem defined and explained. It's a purposeful study, discussion with others, and acquisition of facts. So the relevant facts are gathered, the plan of action is formulated. As we all know, the creative work is largely work of diligence and industry, perspiration rather than inspiration. And final thing is no painter, poet, scientist, or novelist has reached the greater eminence overnight. And almost every creative thinker reports that he worked laboriously during the early days. Incubation. Incubation is nothing, no action, just warm. If incubation is hastened, it will result in abortion. It's a word behavior. One can rest or sleep or do some other problem. It's nothing is added to the egg. It's only kept warm. So during this period, incubation, no new knowledge or experience is added to the existing stock. No external disturbances. We sometimes forget an important name. If recalling is postponed, later on it comes to our mind. Hurry and compulsion are fatal to creativity. Incubation, the mind is relaxed. If incubation is hastened, it will result in abortion. The next stage is elimination. Elimination may occur at any time, even during dreams. The incubation leads to elimination. During this stage, sudden appearance of solution. In case of chimpanzees in Kohler's experiment, there is a sudden dawn of insight, resulting in the connection of sticks with the fruits. The final one is verification. During this stage, the solution we determine whether the solution is correct or not. Sometimes it needs some modification. This is the evaluation of the solution of the problem. Then, in the light of the result, verification or testing, revision made till the solution is workable. The stages should not be considered as rigid and fixed. One may get the elimination without passing through incubation. In certain cases, cycle has to be repeated till they get the solutions. Creativity as a natural endowment needs stimulation and nourishment.